It seems like there's a big PlayStation 5 software update on deck for later in the summer. The Final Fantasy VII content has not stopped yet. I do want to go over the mobile game announcements that dropped yesterday. I don't know what people are gonna think, it's kind of a little bit strange. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis is definitely something that people probably would have picked up if it was on consoles, and hell, people will probably pick it up on mobile. We'll talk that. A Battle Royale Final Fantasy VII game, and also we have an update on Destruction All-Stars, the PlayStation Plus freebie. More on that in a little bit. But first of all, as mentioned on the top, a PlayStation 5 firmware update to enable SSD expansion is on deck for later this summer. A new report published today by the Japanese version of Bloomberg suggests that update is on its way and scheduled to hit at some point this summer. This will allow SSD expansion built into the PlayStation 5, and this is something that the PlayStation 5 is definitely going to need, because you're rocking, 670 gigabytes after all is said and done, and your PlayStation 5 is out of the box and set up, and that is just not enough storage space, especially in 2021, where you have games like Call of Duty and Warzone and everything like that. If you install those games, those are going to take up a large portion of that storage space, and then you're talking about other games. You're talking about games that are assuredly going to get bigger and bigger as this generation progresses. I'm sure deep into this generation we'll have a 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte PlayStation 5, but still, a lot of people bought it at launch. A lot of people just want to upgrade the PlayStation 5 that they have now. They don't want to go and buy another console. That is something that a lot of people are not going to want to do. On top of allowing SSD expansion, the same firmware update should also improve the rotation speed of the console's cooling fan. This will be needed to avoid any potential overheating issues once you add an extra SSD into the console. Storage is something that is going to be more and more of a factor as we go forward, especially as more people are buying digital-based games, download speeds and everything like that. It's something you definitely have to take into consideration, and when games are 100 gigabytes, 150 gigabytes, 200 gigabytes, when you have so many free-to-play games you can download, yes, the option is always there to download games, then, beat them, then delete them. However, a lot of people play multiple games at once. A lot of people just want to have all their games installed. A lot of games have DLC content coming out, a month, 2 months, 6 months after release, and you don't want to be in a position where you're left to re-download those games to play DLC and stuff like that. It's just a lot to take into account, so ideally, you would want some sort of expansion. It would have been best if the PlayStation 5 launched, with a bigger SSD. I really thought they should have just dropped a few variants of the PlayStation 5, maybe even one that was a little bit more than $500 that had a bigger SSD. I don't know. Talking about spending more than $500, could you imagine if those were getting scalped up, how much they would be on eBay and things like that? So, kind of a moot point at this stage of the game. But still, being able to expand your SSD storage is definitely going to be something of note, and the SSD works really fast. I mean, you're getting into these games, the load times are super quick. However, 670 gigabytes is just going to be very limiting, no matter how you slice it, especially because we're talking about early in the generation games are 100 and 150 gigabytes. There's a very big potential that they're just going to get bigger and bigger as this generation goes on. I know there's that idea of, optimizing these games so they are taking up less storage space, but, I expect these games to get bigger and bigger, and it's just going to become more and more evident, especially as we get deeper into this generation, that 670 gigabytes is just not going to fly for the majority of people. And we're at this point where 3 to 4 games takes up a significant amount of that storage space. It's not even about people that are buying 20, 30, 50 games a generation. We're talking about the average Joe that might buy 5 to 10 games a generation, and those games are gonna fill up their SSD like no problem. So we do have to do something about that. Alright, moving on from that, the Final Fantasy VII content has not stopped yet. Yes, Intergrade is coming out, and that's what people are most excited about. PlayStation 5 version, Yuffie content, all that good stuff. However, Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis has been announced for iOS and Android. It's a chapter-structured single-player experience that covers the whole Final Fantasy VII timeline. Now, this is the OG timeline and the original timeline. I don't know how they're going to handle it in the remake, if the timelines are going to intersect or what they're doing with that. We'll find out, but Square Enix has announced Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis for iOS and Android. It'll launch in 2022. An overview of the game notes: Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis is a chapter-structured single-player experience which will cover the whole of the Final Fantasy VII timeline, including the events of the original game, along with all of the Final Fantasy VII compilation titles, as well as new story elements penned by FF7 Remake story and scenario writer Kazuhige Nojima surrounding the origins of Soldier. Now, a lot of things to dissect here. Not only FF7, but the compilation titles. That meaning, I would imagine Dirge of Cerberus, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, maybe even Advent Children content. I don't know. That's a lot of content to cover, especially in a mobile game. I mean, you could port this to PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox, whatever the case may be, Nintendo Switch, and it's gonna sell really, really well. I mean, anything with that Final Fantasy VII label on it right now, I just think is gonna do really, really well from a sales standpoint, and I just think it's a misfire to only make this on iOS and Android. Maybe they'll ultimately drop it on other platforms like they did with Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition. We'll see how that turns out. But this is the OG timeline, which this is something that a lot of people did want. They wanted the OG remake with all of the original story content, but I don't think they wanted it on mobile. Nevertheless, at least you're getting it, and it's another form to experience the Final Fantasy VII experience. And honestly, the footage that we're seeing of this game, it's not even looking that bad. It looks pretty solid, and the remake and the remaster looks pretty good for a mobile title. I could see people enjoying it, just would have liked to see it on consoles as well. And again, I think it could sell really, really well on consoles, and you have to think ultimately Square Enix is looking at that as a possibility. Alright, moving on from that, Battle Royale action game, Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier, announced for iOS and Android as well. FF7 The First Soldier is a Battle Royale action game set in Midgar before the events of FF7. As a soldier candidate, the player will make full use of their magic and abilities in a battle for their survival. Yes, you got summonings, you got all that stuff in here. Not sure how this is going to be received. Like, I expect this game to do really well in Japan. I don't know how it's going to do over here stateside, but yes, we literally have Ifrit coming in a Battle Royale title. Yeah, I don't know what to make of this. Take it for what you will. It's a Battle Royale game. It's set in Midgar. Let's just leave it at that. Lastly, I do want to note Destruction All-Stars is a PlayStation Plus freebie right now. It'll be free February and March. However, it will come out of its PlayStation Plus inclusion, and initially it was supposed to have a $69.99 price point, a $70 game. This was to be at the PlayStation 5's launch. It is now going to be a $20 title after its PlayStation Plus inclusion, so they are really, really cutting back on the cost, but I think that makes all the sense in the world. Look, not every game is going to be able to get away with a $70 price tag. It's just not feasible for, you know, a new IP like this, which didn't have a lot of buzz. You can get away with it with the Demon's Souls remake. Yeah, people will pay $70 for a Demon's Souls remake. Destruction All-Stars at $70, gonna be a hard sell. Even a game like Returnal, which I am very excited for, being that it's a new IP, being that, you know, Housemarque isn't the most known studio in the world, I mean, I think that's going to be a bit of a hard sell at $70. However, at this stage of the game, where I think people are starving for original PlayStation 5 games and not just upgrades, I think Returnal is going to do pretty well on that basis alone. But in the future, when we're deep into this generation, you know, $70 is going to be a bit of a hard sell, and I don't think every game is going to be able to get away with that, but we'll see how things turn out. Final Fantasy VII Integrated is $70, so take that for what you will. But that's going to wrap up this one. Again, PlayStation 5 scheduled for a relatively big firmware upgrade in the summer. That'll enable SSD expansion and cooling fan speed upgrades. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis announced for iOS and Android. A Battle Royale FF7 game and Destruction All-Stars slated to be $20 after its Plus inclusion. That's going to wrap up this one. Sound off with all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.